Thanks very much. We'll maybe move along a little bit to the resource assumptions, revenue assumptions, and the current situation with commodity prices. Just first off, can you advise me what your what the budget 2022-23 assumption is for natural gas revenues and the price per gigajoule?
Thanks for the questions. The 22-23 budget has the average field gate price in Canadian dollars for a gigajoule at $3.74, and the revenues are booked at $3.9 million.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that information. Could you also just provide me the government's projections for drilling of natural gas wells in 2022, as well as the number drilled in 2021? I know this isn't a huge component of our industry, but with the current pricing environment, I know that it's being made more viable.
Thanks. So there's been only 3 natural gas wells drilled in the last 5 years, and this is primarily because the shale gas plays in British Columbia are just much more prolific, and so there is no forecast for additional gas wells.
Thanks for that information. I know the minister stated at budget time that her revenue forecast was based on cautious oil price projections, and that sort of said that it was too soon to tell if there's going to be, if oil prices are going to remain high for an extended period of time, and what that impact could have on revenues. Of course, we're facing these volatile world events, as the minister had described, and that she would continue to monitor both the impact of revenues and affordability as required. You know, we're 6 weeks on from the budget, and the average WTI over that period has been over $105 per barrel. You know, an astounding almost 40% higher than the forecast. And obviously, you do want to be responsible in your estimates because you can't overshoot them. But I guess I'm wondering at this point in time what your projection for the what you're seeing as far as the 21-22 fiscal year. We saw a close of, I think, $888 million were the revenues that were derived for oil and gas. And I guess my question would be, do you still believe that we'll receive less oil and gas revenues in this fiscal year in 2022-23 than in 21-22 when prices, you know, are almost double the oil price assumption of $55 from the year previous?
So the projection for oil and gas is in the budget is $867.5 million, and we are using an assumption of $75.75 US per barrel of oil. And I just looking at my chart now, then you were saying that, you know, you're right, we're only 6 weeks into this budget, so it is very, very preliminary to know what it will average over the course of the 12 months of the fiscal year. But it is already showing coming down somewhat. On April 1st, it was $99.27. April 4th, it went up to $103.27. April 5th, $101. But then April 6th, it's down to $96.23. April 7th, $96.03. And as I go across the chart, there's many times it's falling below that $100 a barrel. So it is way too soon to know what's going to happen over the course of the entire year. What I can say is, and I know you have said a number of times this evening of how there's this massive windfall that we're just assuming is going to happen. In the case of oil, $1 per US for a barrel of oil changes the budget $14 million, which is, I mean, welcomed for sure, and it does accumulate if we are over the course of the 12 months well above the $75.75 that we projected, but we have no way of knowing that. I would say $1 change for a barrel of oil in Alberta is equivalent to $500 million. So it is significantly different on the windfall between the two provinces on the price, based on the price of oil.
Appreciate the response there. The $14 million, am I correct, per dollar? That's a number that's consistent with sort of tracking for years, the last couple of years that the government's been using. Is that correct? The $14 million per.
It changes, and then it also it is also dependent on the differential, and we're projecting the differential to be 14.5%. That differential has been much higher than that at times, so you have to put all of those factors in the equation before you can calculate what the value of $1 of a barrel. Yeah.
Information. I just wanted to make sure that the number had been adjusted to reflect, I think, what we're that changed environment with the tighter differential, better value for Saskatchewan people on that front, a bit more fiscal torque as well with the increase right now where you have your Canadian dollar sort of decoupled a bit with the increases to the oil price and I think just a bit more efficient transportation system than we've dealt with in the past, which I guess is reflected in the differential. So I appreciate that. But my question goes back to the budget number itself. And without a doubt, we're only 6 weeks on. We're in a time of volatility, but you can certainly see, you know, what some of the folks are forecasting. TD Economics, for example, you know, their rate just under the 100. You know, the future curve has been around close to that 100 for the year as well. So my question goes back to the budget amount, the revenues that you're estimating or forecasting will be received this year at $867 million. That is less than we received last year, correct?
Slightly down because at Q3 of the last budget, we were projecting 888 million.
Right, and, you know, I guess into that 888, I suspect there's a chance that that actually closed a little higher. Do you have access at this point to the unaudited statements for the year?
That'll be, again, public accounts when it's all rolled up.
Okay, so the 888 million, so do you think that we're going to receive less oil and gas revenue this year than we did last year?
I have no way of knowing. The final months of last year is when the prices spiked considerably. They've already come down from the peak for sure. So no, we don't know. We literally depend on the industry and their projections for our projections.
Yeah, projections, it seems, from private sector forecasters that we rely on are certainly up, you know, for the year, and significantly higher than what was budgeted last year. So it just seems, you know, difficult to comprehend that we'd be receiving less oil and gas revenues than next year. If oil prices, and so I can do the math on most of this, but if oil prices average, you know, even $90 a barrel WTI in 22, 23, how much additional revenue are we looking at for provincial coffers? And can you break out, I guess, you described, I guess, the $14 impact there, and just maybe breaking out what that would look like, both on the royalty and then also on the resource surcharge?
The quick math is, of course, take $90 minus $75.75, multiply it by 14 million, and you'll have the number that you're looking for. Then we'd have to, I don't know, if we have want to start to do the breakdown tonight of how much is surcharge and how much is it's. I'm being advised it's all speculative at that.
Yeah. Are you able to break out the royalty component and the surcharge modeled at the 90? We rely on the colleagues at Energy and Resources, and that's not the budget here.
What about the potash situation? Certainly, you know, this is an incredibly important industry as well to the province. Both these industries are important to the world, and you know, we see that obviously in face of the horrible realities that I think have been exposed in Ukraine. And so the demand, the need for Saskatchewan potash is huge, and I know the companies are, you know, basically going flat out to meet the demand and to secure markets and do their part with food security. What sort of are you seeing any? Are you making any adjustments from what your budget assumption was based on some of the volume commitments that we're seeing from the sector, from the companies at this point?
Well, it's be very, very unusual to adjust the budget projections before the budget's even passed. And as you are well aware, there is updates and adjustments made each quarter. So the first adjustment would be made at Q1. We are projecting a price per ton of $407 for total revenues of $1.5 billion from potash. But I can't imagine any province adjusting that 6 weeks into their budget before it's even passed. And there's a whole entire fiscal year, and things are definitely changing a lot. So it's unusual It's an unusual request.
Well, no, the question isn't whether or not you're restating it in your actual budget here. The question is simply that you're tracking this as finance, and of course you'll report it out at Q1, maybe in advance of that. But the trends are pretty clear that we're experiencing right now, and I think that that's the question. So so there we have the minister. She certainly has her graph there for which she's tracking this. And I think what we likely have, you want to be cautious with your estimates without a doubt, but it is becoming clear, I think, that there's a situation where we are facing windfall revenues. Even those, when we account for what's in that budget, it's, the revenues are up in a significant way, and certainly in the potash sector as well. I think with the commitments that the undertakings we've seen from industry, the tons will surpass what's forecast, and certainly the price environment is really, at levels that we haven't, sort of new historic levels, or levels we haven't seen for a long time.
Excuse me, Mr. Witherspoon, if you could connect your line of questioning to the estimates and not assumptions, and continue forward, please.
Won't question the chair. The budget's built on assumptions, and we're talking about the assumptions of prices and
future of estimates and stuff like that. Please stay on the estimates.
I won't debate the chair, but the assumptions are what build the budget. It's also what builds the forward-looking forecasts, and we're here for the Ministry of Finance. But I've got. I want to move along to a few other areas as well. Certainly, as I say, the resource sector revenues are significantly higher than years previous, a windfall situation, and again, that's sort of just wanting to make sure we're fully capturing what those revenues are looking like for the year ahead, because the impacts, of course, for organizations and schools and people are that of inflation, and so we want to make sure that we're having a response from government that addresses those challenges. Looking at maybe a few of the other economic pieces, of course, there's the new childcare agreement that your government has entered into with the federal government, and I guess this initiative, the federal childcare initiative, will see fees cut in half by the end of 2022. And I'm wondering if finance has modeled the economic implications of this initiative, and if so, what's the positive impact on GDP and jobs?
We have not. I want to also just sort of bring some caution, because again, several times tonight you've said, like, we have this massive windfall of revenues. We don't know that. That there is a massive windfall of revenues. The revenues, as we projected them, we still have a deficit budget. So there is still some recovery that we need to do, and a path to get back to balance. I don't want a misconception for the public that suddenly in the budget there's this massive windfall and that it's free sailing from here on out, and it's simply not.
Just back to the federal child care initiative and the cut to the $10. So you've been clear that you haven't assessed the positive impact on jobs and the GDP. Have you assessed what its impact would be on the labor supply or the labor force side, those positive impacts?
Probably the best way to do that is, under the education estimates, would be to ask what the wait list is for various daycares. If they keep that data, I'm not sure. And then assume that each of those on a wait list have no child care whatsoever, although many of them on a wait list are on a wait list because they want to move to that particular center. They have their child in childcare somewhere, but the center that they put their name on a wait list is more desirable because it's closer to their work, or it is a service that they would prefer. So that's a little deceptive because you may be on a list, you may be working, and you may have your child in care of some sort, or you may have a relative or a grandma looking after the child until you can get them into daycare. So then you could take those on a list and you could add them all up and then say, okay, if they're all working, then you've got something to work with. But however, I don't think there's any deep dive as to how many are on a list, because quite frankly, there's a number of day home services that we don't even know about. They are regulated because there is a number, even if you have a day home, there's a number of restrictions that you must follow, which is provincial restrictions. So I guess that would be a very blunt instrument of trying to figure out what the impact would be on jobs, because you would have to go and then talk to the people on the wait list and find out if they are not working until that child gets into that particular daycare that they are on a wait list for, or if they are working and their child's on there because they want that particular child care resource. I don't think any of that work's been done.
And I mean, of course, there's other factors there as well. There's maybe folks that are not even on a wait list because they know what the costs were or the lack of accessibility. Maybe that now opens up labor force and training possibilities for folks. So I guess my question is, so there hasn't been work to assess the positive impact or the value on the GDP or on jobs or on labor force. Do you see this as an assessment that's of value for government?
It's hypothetical. Because again, the people that may get a job, should they put their children in daycare and haven't done so to date because they felt it was too expensive, we don't know who they are. So it's hypothetical art. Finance doesn't do those studies.
Okay, I think it's of value, and I think it has a direct relationship to finance when you're talking about GDP impacts, job impacts, labor force pieces, finance, the economy. But I'll leave it there. I think it would be of value to assess those impacts, make sure we're maximizing the value in that investment as well, the return on that investment, making sure we're modeling approaches that will maximize that. Maybe we'll move along a little bit to assess and just sort of get a little bit of an update. Could you provide me an update as to the, I guess, the projection for Saskatchewan's real GDP for the current year, 2022, and then confirm the numbers just going back to 2018, if possible.
Thanks. So maybe I'll start 2018. So GDP is 87.728 billion. 2019, 86.771 billion. 2020, 82.552 billion. 2021, 85.435 billion. 2022, 88.604 billion. And 2023, 90.824 billion.
Sorry, that's real GDP? Those are the actuals? So the real, that's real GDP, and the actual then, sorry, for 2022, or the forecast right now, sorry, is?
That's correct.
Okay. And can you give me the 2018 number again? I apologize, I'm a slow writer here.
I'm sorry? Wait.
The 2018 number on the real GDP.
87,728 billion.
And in 2022, this year, the forecast?
88,604 billion.
Okay, thank you for the information. And I guess the point is, just as I do the math here, we know it's been you know, a flat you know, period with you know, as far as economic growth within the province. I guess that's just the question to the minister. Am I understanding this correctly, that from 2018 until 2022, that the growth rate of the GDP is less than 1% through that entire period? Less than 1% since 2018?
So in Saskatchewan, as in many jurisdictions, provinces, countries, we just experienced a massive contraction, as you should be well aware of. And so, you know, we've recovered and moving forward from that contraction. I believe the contraction was 4.9% from the pandemic.
Thanks. It's just it's a period that, of course, I mean, is one of economic challenge for folks, without a question. You know, almost no economic growth, of course, through that period, and very little wage growth, all while cost of living continues to rise. So I think it's easy to understand the stressful situation that households are in when you look at what they're facing by way of inflation and realities that the realities that they're facing at the grocery store and at the gas station and much more. Moving on a little bit, so the budget provided as I understand, a 2.8% increase in inflation in 2022. Inflation in Saskatchewan in March year over year was 5.7%, highest since 1991. If, as we see this continue, and if we see this kind of continue for the remainder of the year, could you describe some of the financial implications for the economy, for families, for pension plans, some of these areas that, of course, are impacted directly?
No, because you're asking for, again, a hypothetical discussion on economic impacts of inflation, which is theoretically a very, very interesting and conversation to have, but I don't think that's the purpose that we're here tonight, is to start to have, you know, the hypothetical discussions on different impacts on the economy and society as there is inflation, and there will be obviously the impact of a geopolitical situation in Europe and supply chains, et cetera, et cetera. I can discuss how inflation will affect our budget, but I'm not going to discuss here tonight the big, broad societal picture that you're asking for.
Are you able to describe to us some of the impacts for on pension plans, for example, for the those administered by PIBA?
So Jeremy Phillips. So I don't think we could discuss inflation directly related to pension plans and its direct impact. We could talk about interest rates, and we could talk about valuations and the work that actuaries do with respect to inflation assumptions and interest rates and putting that whole package together. That would be the general context that we would use for discussing how inflation reflects on pension plans.
Thank you very much. And are you able to provide a little bit of that detail?
With respect to which plans? Are you talking in general terms of pension plans or specific plans?
Like the ones administered by government where there's a direct impact.
Maybe just make a general comment. You can.
Yeah, so PIBA administers a number of plans, including defined benefit plans and defined contribution plans. And so actuaries would do work on each of those plans with respect to inflation as well as interest rate assumptions. And then that would feed into the annual valuations that each plan have.
And as far as those ones administered by PIBA, are you able to describe a little bit more some of what those actual impacts are with persistent inflation?
Well, I think we can only speak in general terms to each one of the plans in terms of effects on liabilities and assets and the funding ratios for the different plans. And of course, PIBA administers, again, plans that are fully funded and plans that are more pay-as-you-go.
No, I appreciate that, and thanks to all the good folks at PIBA and the good work and attention that they provide to those that they have commitments to. Inflation, of course, will also put pressure on CBAs, and I'm just wanting to assess what plans are overseen by the Personal Policy Secretariat that are coming open in the next 24 months.
I'm not sure. What was your question?
Just with respect to the pressure that inflation places on CBAs, and I'm wondering what plans overseen by the Personal Policy Secretariat are coming open in the next 24 months.
I'm Kelly. Okay, in executive government, we have SGEU. So that expires September 30th, 2022. QP 600 is presently open right now. Sask Energy Unifor Local 649 expires January 31st, 2023. Sask Gaming Corporation is open right now. So, that's PSAC. Sask Gaming Corporation, RWDSU, is open or expires February 6, 2023. Sask Gaming Corporation, RWDSU Moose Jaw, expires September 30th, 2023. Sask Gaming Corporation, IATSE, expires July 6, 2022. SGI COPE expires December 31st, 2022. Sask Power Unifor Local 649 expires December 31st, 2022. Sask Power IBEW expires December 31st, 2022. SaskTel Unifor Local expires March 16th, 2024. Secure Check Unifor Local is open at this moment. Direct West Unifor is open right now. Sask Water Unifor expires December 31st, 2023. Sask Arts SGEU expires September 30th, 2022. Sask Crop Insurance SGEU expires September 30th, 2022. Connexus Arts Center IATSE just concluded. I believe it, I'm not sure of the expiry date on that one. Connexus Arts Center, RWDSU, expires January 26, 2023. Legal Aid Commission, QP, is open. Sask Human Rights, QP, expires July 31st, 2022. Sask Liquor and Gaming Authority, SGEU, expires March 31st, 2023. Tourism Saskatchewan, SGEU, expires September 30th, 2024. Sask Water Agency Unifor Local expires December 31st, 2023. Workers' Compensation Board, SGEU, expires December 31st, 2022. eHealth, SGEU, expires September 30th, 2022. Northlands Regional College expires August 31st, 2022. Sask Polytech Faculty Association, SPFA, expires June 30th, 2023. Sask Polytech SGEU expires June 30th, 2022. We have 6 Southern Regional Colleges, which are all SGEU, which expired August 31st, 2022. STF expires August 31st, 2023. In health, we have QP, which is the Service Providers Union, expires March 31st, 2023. Sask Cancer Agency, which is SGEU, expires March 31st, 2024. SCIU, Service Providers, expires March 31st, 2023. SGEU, Service Providers, March 31st, 2023. SUN expires March 31st, 2024. HSAS expires March 31st, 2024. And I think that just about covers it.
Thank you so much for the accounting on that front of what CPAs will be open in the next 24 months. Certainly, inflation will place pressure on the expectations fairly on that front. What did you assume for growth in salaries and wages in the executive government portion of the 2022-23 budget?
All of our existing tables are at a 2% lift this year.
And this is, so that increase is largely for existing contracts and salary structures. Is there anything that's been provided to reflect the challenge with inflation and the fact that so many employees are losing real purchasing power?
No, the wages are negotiated, and you are quite familiar with that.
Thanks, Minister. With respect to the budget and the the targets that are there, the forecasts that are there, your government is allowing for an increase to SaskPower, SaskTel, Sask Energy rates in 2022. Does your budget depend on these increases in order to meet your financial targets, the forecasts that are there?
This year's budget won't see any of those increases. When the application goes to the rate review panel, there is a relatively lengthy process that is undertaken before an actual increase takes place, and decision points along the way.
So there's no increases to SaskPower rates or SaskTel or Sask Energy rates in this in the current 2022-23 budget year.
It's not to power energy mode. So we're not sure exactly what so with the Crown corporations giving us their forecasts, the only one that's gone for a rate increase is Power, and that, like I said, is a process. So that would be best asked of the Crown Minister.
So, but the question is whether, because it's all integrated, the whole budget. So, just questioning whether or not the increase at Power has been built into this budget.
It would be a couple months if they did.
So we're not sure if, and when is that rate hike? I think it was it in September, or I'd have to go back and so you're not sure if any rate increases.
If it is, it's the last few months of the year if they get approval, and they haven't gone through the process yet.
That's kind of the point of the question. So right now, the targets, the fiscal targets that we have with respect to government and this budget and the Crown's. So you're saying SaskPower, is that built into that their estimates then at this point?
I'm being advised that the last few months, yes, that would have been included in their projections.
And what percent increase is included there then?
What are they looking for? They applied for 4%.
And there's nothing then for SaskTel or Sask Energy as far as rate increases in this fiscal year that are built into this budget?
We can't recall any of them asking for an increase, but we would have to go to CIC and ask them.
Thanks for the information on that front. I don't think we have any more time with CIC at this point, but we can follow up as well to get some of the clarity there. With respect to the $5 million that's profiled in the budget around the fuel charge program, this is what seems to be a new dollar amount. There wasn't anything there in the previous year. Can you describe what that's all about?
Yeah, it's basically a placeholder, although some work will be done because negotiations are ongoing with the federal government in order to transfer the administration of the carbon tax to the province. Nothing has been decided and determined or agreed upon. So it is a placeholder at this point in time, not knowing at this point in time if we will need all of it or any of it.
Okay, and so this is the placeholder. So will those dollars be deployed then? Are there FTEs or staff involved in that, or will
will those dollars not, will they go unspent if the province doesn't take over the carbon tax?
I said 2 million is sort of earmarked for operating and 3 million for capital, which would be the IT system. But none of it gets triggered until we have an agreement.
Right. So there's none of those dollars will be utilized until there's an agreement in place for the takeover of that program. That takes me, I guess, to maybe that area of questioning just a little bit before we move on to some others. With respect to the value of the rebate that that individuals and families receive currently on this front, with the province taking it over, would that decline from what they're receiving at this current point in time?
Decisions or agreements have been made. Decision I would make myself.
When you're looking at taking over that program, you have a proposal now at this point, is that right? And that's been submitted to the federal government?
There's been several, I believe, made to the federal government.
We have one that's there right now, is that correct?
It's been a challenge of trying to get clarification in various areas with the federal government. So there's not a final submission at this point in time. We're still waiting for response on a number of areas from the federal government for clarification on a number of fronts. I'm not intricately involved in all of it. You know, there is some back and forth between myself and Minister Friedland's office, but it's being managed on a number of fronts.
And within that proposal, is there design within that as well around rebate structure and offsets and whatnot? No, it's the administration, more the administration of the program. Straightforward question here, but the revenue division, I think salaries are to increase by 15.6%, budget over budget. Can you explain this increase?
And I can be corrected by my officials. Part of it would be the collective bargaining increase, and also we are hiring more auditors, as I mentioned in my opening comments.
Thanks for that information. Do you know the number of, so it's the number of FTEs then that have driven that cost up, or?
9.
9 new FTEs. Okay. How many more FTEs, or what's the FTE change for all of finance in this fiscal year? None.
Yeah.
With respect to equalization and making the case to secure a fair deal, a better deal for Saskatchewan, I guess I'd be interested in hearing what submissions have been made of late to the federal government and working with partners within the Federation on this front, the other provinces. I just want to get an update as to proposals and undertakings on this important front.
So the next year that it's open for supposed negotiation is 2024. However, I would like to speak at length, but I won't, of the past negotiations or lack thereof, because it was open in 2020. I don't, 2019, okay. The officials recalled very little conversation with their federal counterparts, and there was zero with the provinces, zero. There is no consultation with our present federal government on equalization, and in fact, it was just announced kind of along with their budget, and here it is. And we had submitted suggestions prior to that date with no responses and no reaction. So that is kind of the consultation federal government style.
It's a persistent frustration, isn't it? You know, and it's not just obviously with the current federal government. The previous federal government had broken its very clear commitment to Saskatchewan people on this front as well, which is why it seems to me that the undertaking is an important one for Saskatchewan, and we should need to be, you know, I think we're going to have to be leading the way in making sure that we're advancing that conversation and those proposals, both with the federal minister and also with the other provinces. Certainly, I don't think can, you know, take a passive approach on this front. Were there undertakings in the previous year, recognizing that negotiation doesn't come up till 2024, but in advance of that, with the federal minister or with other provinces to advance the case for improvements to equalization for Saskatchewan?
Conversations over the past 2 years with my federal counterpart has been totally focused on COVID and the financial pressures of COVID and what they're going to do for COVID and what the provinces were interested in help, in support for COVID. She did not entertain any conversations about equalization whatsoever, and nor have I sent her correspondence, quite frankly, over the past 2 years. I've, as I said, sent correspondence asking for clarification on some of their programs and on the carbon tax, but don't necessarily get responses from her office. But now that your party has joined the federal Liberals, I'm hoping that you will help us on that front.
Well, I'm a Saskatchewan New Democrat. I know the minister is teasing. I know she knows that I, you know, have no challenge finding independence on matters and being very clear with any party in Ottawa, whether that's the federal NDP on a matter or the federal Liberals or the Conservatives. You know, where we will always be focused is on Saskatchewan's interests, and that'll certainly be the case, always has been. I know the minister would know that on equalization. Of course, the previous government, in fact, had the lawsuit in place, a very solid case with the federal government that was dropped shortly after that election to give peace a chance on this front was sort of the pitch, but it didn't work out so well. Anyways, I appreciate the minister's interest in the file. I think that for us to be successful in advancing this conversation, there's some parts of Canada that are going to be less interested in the conversation. And, you know, regardless of the temperature of the federal government, whatever party that is, that's there, I think we need to be consistent in our entries, principled in those entries, and doing all we can to elevate the importance of that conversation. Are you able to share with us what the most recent proposal from Saskatchewan would be, when it was submitted, and what that looks like? I know the big areas are around how hydro electricity get treated and how resource revenues get treated.
This has nothing to do with my budget.
Mr. Witherspoon, again, I would ask you to keep on track of the estimates in front of you, please.
I appreciate that. So the work on the equalization file occurs out of the Ministry of Finance. It has a direct impact on
the financial position of the province now and into the future. So I would submit that we should be able to get an accounting of the activities that have been undertaken, the proposals that we're advancing, and a clear understanding of what in the current fiscal year out of the Ministry of Finance, what's committed to advance those conversations. Are you able to share in the year ahead, then in the current budget that we're looking at, what sort of time and attention the equalization file is receiving, and what sort of actions Saskatchewan people can expect on this front?
Probably dedicate, I don't know, going by past years, 20 to 50 hours towards reading material on it. A lot of the conversations, I don't time them, so I'm not sure what kind of time I'll dedicate with conversations with Minister Friedland on it. I do a lot of research and reading on equalization, compiled a lot of ideas on it. I'm not sure how I'm not dedicating any money to it at this point in time, other than the paper, to maybe do a letter at some point.
We'll move along. I would urge that I think it's going to be our consistent entries on these that are going to be required with other finance ministers, with the other provinces, at First Ministers meetings, and with the federal government. And I know we've got an exceptional team of in that Ministry of Finance who will be in a very good position to lead that conversation. But for us to actually affect change on this front, it's going to have to be a consistent effort, and I'll leave it there at this point because I want to move along to. But it's certainly an important area for us to act on and improve the deal for Saskatchewan people, ensure fairness for Saskatchewan people. With respect to the, sorry. Yeah.
We don't disagree on the importance of it by any means. But your questions are very difficult to answer. I don't know in the next 365 days how many hours I'm going to spend on equalization, or how many letters I'm going to write, or how many phone calls I'm going to have. I have no way of projecting that on the floor tonight. And so that is why your questions are very problematic to answer. Agreeing wholeheartedly with you, it's of huge importance, but the changes that we have asked consistently for have been ignored, and it takes other provinces agreeing to those changes, or at least supporting us in those changes. We did get unanimous support for changes to the stabilization program. We worked very hard communicating with each and every province to get that unanimous support for changes to that program, and basically the federal government ignored us. So if you want to do a whole equalization discussion here tonight, I mean, we equally agree that it's extremely important, and there's components in it that desperately need to change, or else Saskatchewan will always remain in a situation where they do not qualify, and I believe very unfairly so. But I don't think that's the purpose of this estimates on a budget. Again, it's a hypothetical question or discussion. And, if you have suggestions of what you think should be changed in the formula, because it's a very, very complex formula, and there are a couple of changes that would definitely help Saskatchewan's situation in order to qualify for equalization, or even going back to the purpose of equalization. The intent of equalization has been absolutely lost in the way that it's calculated and dispersed at this moment in time. But it's a federal program. It's not a provincial program. It is a federal program. So you need to get all the provinces on the side, and even that may not change with the way the federal government decides to allocate that funding or what goes into the calculation. It is their choice to make. It is their program, and getting consensus and going through the work of working with all of the provinces to get consensus on changes to the stabilization program, which Did take some work because the changes didn't benefit many of the provinces, but they supported us anyways. Didn't change the federal government. So we could talk at length, we could talk the clock on equalization, love to. But I'm not sure you're going to gain anything other than we're both passionate about it.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to sort of get any sort of frustration in the questions. These are, I think, for us to succeed even as best we can, if we can be a united assembly in these calls, the question was simply that I'd asked what undertakings had the minister taken on, what, in the previous year, what had a proposal looked like, what can we expect in the year ahead. I don't think we should throw in the white towel on this. It's not I think we should, be consistent in those entries. And I think that, we should be looking to, what sort of engagement do we need to have with the provinces and the federal government, in the years ahead, because we don't want to get to that point in 2024, as the minister describes, where all of a sudden, they say, oh, negotiations are done, and, there's not, improvements that are brought. So as best we can, I'll be here to be a constructive force on, that's my offer on this end, and, with whoever we need to in Ottawa from our end, and it's an important file to Saskatchewan. I'd like to move along a little bit and just see if there's a bit of an explanation around the 700. Actually, I'll move along to a different. In the department itself, do you have any hard to recruit positions that you're dealing with right now?
Yeah, there's a number of positions that have been difficult to recruit over many years. So first, in our revenue division, on the audit and collections front, so bringing in revenue auditors has been relatively difficult, and there's a bit of we take a little bit of pride in the fact that we're training auditors for the private sector, because we bring in auditors, train them up. In many cases, they'll get their designation and then they'll be recruited by private sector firms because they're highly sought after they've received public sector training. So we have a bit of a perennial problem in that, and that drives a lot of vacancy with respect to positions within revenue division in general. On the treasury management side, you had opportunity to speak with Rod Balkwell, who's our executive director, but capital markets expertise is, again, a little bit more difficult to recruit. You're looking for CFAs who've had capital markets experience, and they're typically recruited or poached by private equity firms, and so it's something that we've been monitoring and trying to address with respect to kind of innovative kind of recruitment programs. So those are just two areas. In general, I would say there is across public sector, and maybe you may have heard this through our colleagues in Public Service Commission, that there is shortages of professionals in a whole range of occupations, and it's post-pandemic. There's been a significant shift in resources out to the private sector or to different forms of work.
Thanks for that summary of the hard to recruit spaces. And what about over the last 5 years? How's the Ministry of Finance doing from a perspective of a representative workforce? Are you able to share how any trends there, or where the Ministry of Finance is at?
I know that we certainly continue to work to ensure that we are being as representative of the makeup of the public as possible, and are making progress. I know the last 5 years happens to coincide with my tenure as deputy minister, and we've made a lot of progress with respect to culture and engagement, and ensuring that we have in place renewed committee structures around diversity and inclusion to start helping build that awareness across the ministry. We have actively, as a leadership team, discussed how to do more focused recruitment with respect to, in particular, Indigenous populations, but also with respect to visible minorities in general. We have entered into a number of pilot initiatives with various partners to try to do recruitment with respect to persons with disability, et cetera. So I would say that we're making progress, and that we need to make more progress, but there is focused attention on the question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, and obviously a very important focus, and I appreciate the attention to it. Certainly, accountable government is important, and I know that the Ministry of Finance, has great expertise in completing comprehensive program evaluations, and obviously this is really important to report on the performance of government and improve performance and ensure best value. I know the ministry undertakes these evaluations. Is there a reason why that type of information wouldn't be posted online or made available publicly?
So, in fact, the Office of Planning, Performance and Improvement resides in the Ministry of Finance and is responsible for the accountability framework. They're really a center of excellence that's focused on, planning, budgeting, performance assessment, and they support the rest of government ministries in their, with respect to their questions around assessment. So they do significant work to ensure that there is continuous improvement monitoring that occurs within government ministries, and all of that reporting emerges through ministry annual reports. So each ministry will produce an annual report that will outline its continuous improvement and or program evaluation, which is a more robust, deeper dive, if you will, with respect to kind of program metrics. And so that information is made public through each respective ministry.
Okay, so those program evaluations, are that the Ministry of Finance is involved in. I know they have exceptional capacity on this front. It's very important work. Those then are posted on the wherever the program resides, whichever ministry they're posted publicly.
This is a clarification. So the ministry doesn't actually conduct the reviews. So the ministry is responsible as a Centre of Excellence, the OPPI division for, or branch, pardon me, for oversight with respect to continuous improvement program evaluation across the government of Saskatchewan. So that occurs within each relative or respective ministry. And those ministries then will report in their annual reports on any notable continuous improvement and or program evaluation outcome in those in their annual report documents.
Thanks for that information. So the Ministry of Finance itself isn't conducting those the program reports themselves or those assessments. And the results of those assessments that are done by various ministries are posted publicly.
They will report within their annual reports on any sort of notable trends with respect to continuous improvement or program evaluation reporting. I don't know if
Right.
I would have to see whether ministries are posting that information publicly or not, like the full reports, but certainly are reporting on that in their annual reports.
Thank you. Thanks for that. The budget makes reference to prior year adjustment payments for 2021-22 personal and corporate income taxes. What are the amount for each? And then also, are you anticipating any prior year adjustments in 2022-23?
So for corporate income tax, we're forecasting 840.5 million, pardon me, of revenue. And so that's and I'll just share with you the reconciliation that picks up the prior year's adjustment member. So current year tax revenue for 22-23 is $937.9 million. Then there's incentive measures that are part of the tax system that are backed out of $104.1 million, and then the prior year's adjustment is $6.7 million and that'll bring the total to the $840.5 million. And just on individual income tax, so the individual income tax estimate for 22-23 is $2.796.9 billion. That is made up of the current year tax revenue of $2.897 billion, less $84.1 million for incentives, and then prior year adjustments of $16 million, bringing the total to the $2.796.9.
And I can be corrected, but part of the reasons for adjustments is because we are, for PST, we collected and pretty much we know those numbers within that year with, a few month lag for when they're submitted. For personal income tax, we're reliant on then getting the data at the end of the day from CRA. And there's about a 1-year lag on that information, and sometimes that's where an adjustment may come through. And for corporate income tax, there's almost 2-year lag on, and so they prepay to the province on the projected, what we project will be the revenues, and then it's adjusted at some point when the actuals are available. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks so much for that. Just looking for a little bit of clarity as to the contractual obligations of government, and I know from public accounts from 2020 to 2021, there was a dramatic increase on that front. Total contractual obligations up to $24.6 billion. Year over year from 17.9 billion the year before. Could the minister provide or officials provide what the factors are on this front and what the details are, and then if you're in a position to forecast what this looks like for 2022, and of course that's total government service organizations, the operating transfers, education, total government business enterprise, and then the purchase power agreements.
So my officials have pointed out that this is all information that's in public accounts. And so this year's budget, you won't see till it's rolled up for public accounts, which is, again, available then for questioning at that time. Between 2021 and 2020, the biggest difference, one of the biggest difference was in power of obligation, which would be power purchase agreements, probably for wind. But I'm literally, without having the minister here or SAS Power here, I am projecting what it might be. So in fairness, these are questions that you need to ask in public accounts when it's available.
I was looking for the factors. So I have the public accounts numbers and the fiscal reality of the province reported out around the contractual obligations. So I was wondering on, it's just a dramatic change in a year, and I was wondering what factors, like even the education piece there, going from 2020 it was 0.4 billion, and then it was next year, the year following, it's 2 billion. Now, is that pension obligations that we would have there? Would that be reflective of?
The change, I would think, yes. I don't see any education. Have that information here. You'll have to wait for public accounts and then ask those questions at that point in time.
Okay, so now we would have contractual obligations in this current in this budget that we have right now. Am I correct on that? Do you have information as to what those contractual obligations look like in this current fiscal year? It impacts the budget obviously directly.
The budget is put together on the basis of expenditures and revenues, and each ministry brings forward what they need for their budget for that given year, and if they want to make changes, if they found savings or whatever. Within that may be ongoing contractual obligations, but it's in the details of their specific budgets. So again, it's not public accounts is the way to get to that detail, or else you need to ask for each ministry as it comes forward with their budget estimates, what contractual estimate or obligations do they have within their budget. Because yes, finance does the budget, and we're here to talk about finance's budget, but we don't have detailed roll-ups for the entire across government in our budget.
No, I appreciate it. I was just looking for some clarity. I mean, the variances are significant year to year, and I suspect in each case there's quite a few different factors. The purchase power agreements with power are pretty clear, I think, what that would be. But I was looking for some clarity on the other areas and what that looks like this year. But I'll move along with my questioning at this point with respect to the value add agriculture incentive, the SVAI. Certainly we see some really awesome announcements that have been and commitments that have been made by the private sector in this space, in the value add space, and these are obviously promising, very important to our future, important from an economic perspective and the jobs that they'll provide. And of course, there's long-term fiscal and economic benefits for the province. Out of those sorts of investments and projects, and we have some significant ones that have been made. So these are important projects. What I want to just get a sense of is just how the value add incentive is structured, and how it's working, how it interacts with these projects. So I guess my question would be, if you have a cost over the next 5 years assessed to this program. Of course, we know there's many economic benefits and revenues that will be derived as a result of these investments, but wondering what the cost of this program is.
You mentioned it has been a very successful program to date. It's an untransferable tax rebate and capital expenditures valued at $10 million or more for newly constructed or expanded value-added agriculture facilities in Saskatchewan. We made a change to the program that was introduced late 2017, so it came into effect in 2018. We're making a change in this budget where you get a rebate that can be applied against your corporate income tax based on the amount of your capital expenditures. So between 10 million and 400 million, you get a 15%. Between 400 million and 600 million, you get 30%. And any project that has a capital expenditure of over 600 million gets 40%. The tax credits applied, as I said, against the corporate income tax owing over a 3 to 10 year period once the facility's been brought into production. There's a cap on any one project cannot get a rebate above and beyond $250 million. The importance of this is, as you pointed out, it is to attract private sector investment into our province, and that then therefore creates jobs. It's huge for job creation, and not just direct job creation, but job creation from all the spin-off that the project will, from the workers for that job, then are shopping in our stores, they're eating in our restaurants, etc. There's the spin-off economy for the suppliers for the facility, and it provides a market, of course, for Sask agriculture projects. And the net benefit to the province will be quite substantive. When you ask, and I know you want a projection, so I'm just going to give you hypothetical because that's all that can be given at this point in time. There's one project has been conditionally improved, and I believe there's 14 that are tentatively in the approval process, but none of them are, most of them aren't even in construction yet, so the end value of the cost of capital is unknown. But should I give you a hypothetical example? If there is 15 of all 15 of those projects, cost and capital cost was $925 million or more, then the credit that they would be able to cumulatively use over 3 to 10 years would be $3.75 billion. 250 million times the 15 projects. The total investment, however, would be $13.875 billion. So in a second example that I've mocked up, if we had 5 projects that cost $499 million, then you would be crediting those 5 projects would have gained a credit of $299.25 million. The total investment from those 5 projects would be $1.995 billion. Then you had an additional 5 projects that came in at $599 million. So then their credit would be $598.5 million, and the investment would be $2.995 billion. If the last 5 projects came in at over the $925 million, the credit would be $1.25 billion, and the total investment for those projects, should they be $925 million, would be $4.625 billion. So in that scenario, the credit cost, or the foregone revenue, considering that none of it would be foregone because we would not have attracted many of these projects without this incentive. But the credit would be 2.14775 billion, and the investment would be 9.615 billion. So I mocked up a number of examples, and I can keep going through them so that you can understand that we can't project because we don't know where the projects are coming in yet. So I did one with 5 projects that are 50 million, and then another 5 at 200 million, and 2 projects at 450 million, and 2 projects at 500 million, and 1 project at 1 billion, and what we would get for the credit, and then what the total investment would be. I could do that one too, which is probably closer to what we're going to see from these projects, but we don't know yet. What we do know is that the investment and the credit and the spin-off taxation and stimulus within the economy is zero unless we attract the investment in the first place.
Yeah, no, I wasn't meaning to, cause the minister to feel like I was challenging her. These programs, these investments are so critical, and there's cost-benefit analysis to the way you design a program. And I appreciate that none of these, some of these projects may not proceed, so you can't, and we don't know to the extent, the size of that investment. The chair tells me I've got one more question. What a guy! I've got, pages here, and we've got all these great officials here. So I guess I do want to know, I can't get 2 questions, Chair. One, well, I'll just stay focused on this program, and then I'll try to attach a second question into one and see if the Chair catches it. Just the change around the retroactivity, why was that made? Were there undertakings or commitments made to any of the proponents in advance of that change? Was it an equity piece as far as some of the other projects that are now coming into the queue, and folks would be saying, well, this should apply? So that's an important question, and directly related to that, and the answer would be, of course, the good work that I've given a shout out to over the years around making sure we properly capture the tax on out of province e-commerce. An important file where I know this ministry has provided leadership, one that I've followed up with over the years. I'm interested in that retroactivity component to the SVAI and the revenue collection and effectiveness of the changes that have been brought to ensure fairness on the taxation side for local businesses and Saskatchewan people around the e-commerce piece and the changes that have been made.
The SVAI is, yes, it was a fairness. It was kind of twofold going retroactive, but it was fairness to the project that had already, was in the actively going forward with this program. There was a number that were definitely looking at the program, but the program is to, with this design, was to not only attract the investment initially, but there was decisions made then that they may, I'm just going to say double in size, but it may not be double in size. There was projects that were looking at a certain capacity of value add, but with this incentive, they will double that rather than waiting 5 years down the road and then doing a second facility. So it did a double lift. It brought them in, but also made decisions to expand. So in fairness to the project that we had before, and of course there was not a lot of interest through 2 years of COVID. So we only had one before because we went from introducing the program into COVID. That gave them the opportunity then to decide whether they wanted to go bigger.
And just on the electronic platform, electronic distribution platform, so we've currently licensed 115 companies, some 16 in streaming services, 11 in digital marketplace, 75 online retailers, online retailer and streaming service. There's a combination of one, and I think you probably know who that is. Online accommodation platform services, I've got 2 and computer services 10. So we're actively working on registering an additional 159 companies. And just in terms of the revenue that we've been able to bring in 2021, that brought in 66.2 million, and in 21-22, that has brought in 70.2 million, for a total of 136.4 million in revenue.
Thanks so much. It's been an important file, and it's one I've raised over the years and pushed. And I just want to, I know the expertise out of this ministry's been very effective in realizing some fairness for local retailers and benefits for Saskatchewan people on this front. Ministers, or the chair's looking at me. I just want to say thank you so much to the minister. I know our time is up. Thanks to the minister, thanks to all the officials for their time here today. Importantly, to those officials, thanks for the work you do day in, day out throughout the year, and all those that are involved in your work. And thanks to committee members and to the chair that I thought was a bit tough at times. Thought he'd cut his fellow Boston Bruin fan some slack, but thanks to the chair as well.
Thank you. I'd ask the minister for some closing comments.
Thank you as well for the questions throughout the evening and for your time that you gave up from coaching hockey. Thank you to the committee members and to all of the officials who are here with us tonight.
Thank you, Minister. I'd also like to thank the minister, the officials, the committee members. A little tough on the opposition there too as well. The staff, Hansard and security that are working here tonight. And having reached our agreement, agreed upon time for the consideration of the estimates today, we'll adjourn the consideration of the estimates for the Ministry of Finance. I'd now ask a member to move that this committee now do adjourn. Mr. Scorpad moves. Is that agreed? Carried. This committee stands adjourned to the call of the chair.